Hello. All right. Good morning.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. I'm Representative Andrea Romero from the state of New Mexico. It's such a pleasure to be here at COP30 in the Amazon. What a beautiful place and time, an immersive climate experience. As many of us have been sweating for the last several days, if not weeks. This is a truly amazing opportunity to talk about in the Amazon what's happening in the high desert of New Mexico. Do you want to introduce yourself, Travis?
Yeah, this is what climate change feels like.
Okay.
And I'm Travis Kellerman. I'm also from New Mexico. I just finished moving from the governor's office, where I was the climate advisor, now to the energy department, where I'm a senior advisor. And I focus a lot on clean energy, decarbonization, our oil and gas sector, which is a big part of our economy, and also is a big source of our emissions.
I love talking to you, Travis, about how passionate you are about all of the things that we're doing with our fuel modernization standards, how we've been doing that. But what I was hoping to do is set a bit of the stage for what folks may not be understanding about what's going on in the high desert of the Southwest in New Mexico. Just to set a little bit of cultural and social context, New Mexico is home to 2.2 million people. We are a majority state with the highest population of Native American people in the United States per capita. We have 23 federally recognized pueblos, tribes, and nations, including Navajo Nation. And so, which also we share with Arizona. There's a lot going on in our state. And so when we talk about what we've been doing in particular, and probably the last really 7 years, is focusing our energy and resources on how to build the whole lifestyle scheme of what people want when they come to live in New Mexico. And that starts with making historic investments in everything from early childhood education. We'll have an endowment in perpetuity. We have free childcare for all. We also have tuition-free college. Knowing that we have to educate the future workforces and energy workforce of the future, we are setting the stage for that now in New Mexico. Just recently, we brought 50% of our population out of poverty by just changing our tax code. So we're looking at every opportunity to build wealth in perpetuity, and we'll talk about that. Right now, New Mexico has $68 billion in a sovereign wealth fund that has blossomed out of our oil and gas revenues, that we sit in the Permian Basin. We've been very, very successful, obviously, in a fossil fuel economy, and we are looking to transition that very, very rapidly, as we have a deadline by 2045 to be net zero, carbon-free production of energy by that time frame. And we have to be at 50% by 2035, so we have a lot of work to do. Most of our people are on renewable energy as far as the source of energy that they're using inside of New Mexico, but we want to be an exporter state, and California is really excited about our SunZia line. We have a lot of grid modernization and infrastructure to build, but we also have a lot of wealth right now to invest in that. And we are investing close to $1 billion in venture capital funding for climate-focused projects, all sorts of economic development across the board. But we want to solve the world's problems in New Mexico. We have 2 national laboratories, the highest per capita PhDs in the United States in our backyard, in Los Alamos County and beyond. And it's been such an incredible thing to see us really starting to turn the crank on the innovation that we need to go into a clean energy future. So that's what we have to set the stage for some of this. So we have an incredible place to do all of this in New Mexico, being that not only do we have the social and cultural landscape and the arts, we have been doing a ton in the clean energy and carbon-free space. Do you want to talk about that, Travis?
Yeah, and thank you, Representative. This is a unique opportunity for the two of us to be in the Southern Hemisphere and far away from New Mexico. That usually gives a different perspective. So here we've been talking a lot about how it feels literally in this venue. It's very different from the high desert, as you said, of New Mexico. And one of our bigger problems that is connected to energy is our water problem, our water issue, which is really concentrated in southern New Mexico in some pretty extreme drought. Drought precedes wildfires, it intensifies wildfires. And so we've been looking at not just how do we address the wildfire problem, but also how do we preserve our forests, how do we preserve our communities in southern New Mexico that are now having to re-drill their wells, go deeper into groundwater reserves that are increasingly depleted. There's a myth that the desert doesn't have any water. The reality is the water's below the dirt, and you have to get down to it, into a clean water, what's called an aquifer. What we've discovered and what we put in our 50-year water plan, which looks into the future of how we become a sustainable place, how we support communities going forward. You don't build an economy, you don't have generations of New Mexicans with the stability that we're starting to give them with our social programs unless there's an adequate and robust water supply for them into the future. What we've discovered in that 50-year water plan and what we've put in there is the discovery and tapping into what are called brackish aquifers, which are saline water deposits even deeper down than our clean water reserves. We can use that water, if we purify it, for a number of things, for human consumption, for agriculture, but we can also use it for industry that would otherwise use clean water. So our oil and gas industry, for example, when they use water, it produces water. It's called produced water because once they use it in fracking operations or in drilling, it brings up a lot of the chemicals associated with oil and gas that make it unsuitable for using anywhere else. So what we need to do is treat that water to reuse it. Right now we're moving a lot of it to Texas and also supplement it with brackish aquifer water. Now the water issue is something that we've dealt with not just the past few years but for centuries. And our culture is based around the preservation of that water, not just the Rio Grande, which runs north to south through New Mexico and is sort of one of the major lifebloods, the major veins and arteries for New Mexico. It's used for agriculture, and there are many other smaller tributaries and rivers that feed what are called acequias. So these are traditional, it's a mixture of indigenous and Spanish practices that use irrigation canals and levees and different breaks to create what are essentially microclimates and dense vegetation around these canals. For the communities that use it for agriculture, their temperatures, in spite of increased heating, as we all know, those temperatures are actually much cooler than the rest of New Mexico, than the rest of the area around it. They make it sustainable for people. But if the water isn't there, the vegetation isn't there, the microclimate isn't there. Water really is a key part of our adaptation strategy. If we don't preserve our waterways and we don't find ways to keep the Rio Grande flowing and keep our acequias full, we lose those microclimates and we lose the sustainability and the economic base of many parts of our state. There's one other piece from what you mentioned I want to just reemphasize around our oil and gas sector because it's not always popular or a focus other than opposition to talk about oil and gas. Oil and gas is part of the energy transition, and we don't view it as a necessary evil so much as something we can control in its impact on the rest of the world. As a major producer, we're number 2 in the US for oil and number 3 for natural gas. Those volumes are tremendous, and we're exporting more of them every day. So the energy that Japan needs to run their power plants, their gas power plants, they use liquefied natural gas. We're in trade negotiations and in a relationship to supply them with that gas, certified through our certified gas program that it is actually a lower carbon intensity, lower methane intensity than any other available gas in the world. We aim to be the cleanest barrel of oil, cleanest MCF of gas for the next few decades as we transition out of fossil fuels, minimizing and limiting as much as possible the negative impact of emissions associated with the oil and gas sector. That's our role in the climate change and climate action.
Thanks for that, Travis. I know it's from our district and where I represent, we are very clear that we want zero carbon, and we also don't want to have to create these export externalities that we know affects the world. And so the fact that we can get to a place of even knowing, having the data, having the market understanding of what that is, while we're still in a global commoditized, oil and gas world, it's really important for us to understand what we're trying to take stock on for how we transition and how we do that responsibly. So it's so amazing to just hear a lot about how that happens on the inside of our regulatory schemes, and of course from the legislative perspective is how we keep building, how we keep holding accountable what we're doing, and with the international courts of justice making historic opinion this last summer about what accountability will be for the exporters of emissions, and how it is that we hold ourselves accountable. We're looking to all of those different ways in which we can contribute to the better half of that. So,
and Representative, you also mentioned, in connection to that, our investments and our major sovereign wealth fund.
Yep.
We've put $300 million, so it's a mixture of our state budget and that fund. As you know, we were talking earlier, the legislature controls the purse of New Mexico and where our budget goes. And our state investment council determines how and where we invest our sovereign wealth fund. Now, those investments, more recently, you mentioned the $1 billion going into venture capital. We've also, a few years ago, put $300 million into our Land of Enchantment Fund to protect the forests and the natural and working lands of New Mexico. So we have a lot of what I would consider regenerative agriculture and ranching even that maintains many grasslands. We also have the Gila National Forest. That's where I went to high school. That's where I worked in as a lumberjack at one point, making fire breaks to try to reduce the wildfire risk. A fire break is exactly what it sounds like. It's a break for a forest fire to stop so it doesn't spread easily, and you thin out a strip of forest for that. Those practices, they need funding and they need continuous maintenance. So we're not looking for carbon credits necessarily, but we are looking to preserve those lands to hold our carbon. That carbon store is tremendous. It's about 53 years worth of all New Mexico emissions are stored in our forests. This year, we're going to release the emission reduction roadmap, and it calls for many new investments that pull from both the Sovereign Wealth Fund and the state budget. We've already made certain key investments, and I know you've been a big supporter of something called the Community Benefit Fund. That was the largest single climate investment in New Mexico history. $210 million focused on grid modernization, decarbonization efforts, forest preservation, across the board EV infrastructure build-outs, so many different categories directly funded by our state budget. Social investment, environmental investment, and teaching people how sustainability is actually good for the economy and creates jobs for them, paid for by our state budget, our sovereign wealth fund, and partners in the private sector that match those funds. So we have a number of matching funds that doubles or even triples the amount we're investing as a state.
Yeah, that's so amazing. And we've been sort of preserving the social fabric in that space of, while we're dealing with some unprecedented things happening across the country, so many people have come to New Mexico to find a safe space to be able to live and thrive, and understand too that we're building that the framework for the future, starting with early childhood all the way through adulthood. And there's a lot of different opportunities on the table for us to also invest in the training of the future, and working with any variety of industries that want to come in and fit in that social fabric to help us build that out. So it's been such a pleasure to be able to talk a lot about that today, Travis, and to sit with the Climate Registry in this space to be able to tell our story about what we're trying to do in New Mexico. And of course, we're hiring and wanting to build that future together. So if you're out there and you're interested in what we're doing, please feel free to reach out to us. And thank you so much for the time.
One last plug, we're hiring. The Climate Action Plan is going to be released this year, which outlines thousands of new jobs across the state in climate, in clean energy, exactly what the representative was talking about. Thank you.
Thanks, Travis. Thanks, everybody.